Let's get some more discussion now on the budget and where the government's headed. I'm joined by the member for Wentworth, Allegra Spender. Thanks for your time. The spending versus inflation challenge, it's a real one right now for the government because a lot of people are hurting, but Governor Bullock was quite clear yesterday, Allegra Spender, that is something they're still concerned about, the upside risk to inflation.
Look, I think that's absolutely right. A lot of people are hurting right now, but we don't need a budget that fuels inflation. So I think this has to be a very prudent budget that is very measured in terms of its spending. There are areas where we do need investment, and I'd put mental health, domestic violence, and housing key on that list. But this can't be a budget that has a broad spending appeal. And frankly, we need to be doing what we can to try and take the pressure off inflation on household energy bills and areas like that, but also make economic reform so that also puts downward pressure on inflation, from the supply side.
And on Tuesday night, what will you be monitoring? What will you be watching out for as you judge whether or not this is a responsible budget or not?
Look, I think I will definitely be looking at that overall spend number, and seeing are there areas where the government could pull back on spending or delay spending, particularly in the next 12 months, so that the government doesn't add to further to inflation, because that is something that hurts all Australian families. The second thing I'll be looking for is, however, support for those areas that we do, those people who are most vulnerable, and also those areas that need investment, like mental health, like domestic violence, but also housing, because we know that housing costs are one of the key drivers to inflation. And, I think there's some reforms we could make in that space. I will be looking at, of course, from a climate point of view, looking at how can we have, bring down household energy bills, but also invest in renewable energy at the same time through, I've put forward ideas such as a people power plan. And finally, I'll be looking for reform. Now, the Treasurer has hinted there may be some reform in terms of business taxes reform, so I'll be looking at that carefully, as well as other areas where the government could go further to make it easier to do business in this country.
The Prime Minister says the Made in Australia initiative is about restoring the faith with blue-collar workers. Does the policy stack up in your view?
Look, we just haven't seen the detail yet. In the clean energy space, in that energy transition space, I believe that Australia should be making some investments in that space, and particularly because we don't have a economy-wide price on carbon, because Australia could be and should be, frankly, a renewable superpower. I do believe that the government has a place to play in that space, but how it plays is really important, because we have seen governments in the past waste significant amounts of money, getting behind projects that don't make sense or propping up industries that just aren't economic for Australia. So I think we need very clear guardrails on this. I believe, institutions like the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, ARENA, the NRF, they've already been set up to make some investments. So I think we need to be very careful about how that is done. And so I'll be looking at that area very carefully when the Treasurer speaks next week.
Your electorate and you represent many Jewish Australians, and I know there's been a lot of concern in Wentworth, as there have been in various other parts around the nation, on the rise of anti-Semitism. Josh Frydenberg, in his documentary for our channel, Sky News, he interviewed Dennis Richardson, who pointed out that from the river to the sea, and the former ASIO boss, Dennis Richardson, said it's a very violent statement. And that essentially there's no place for it. Mr Albanese was asked about this, and he said it is. And Josh Frydenberg asked him, and so it has no place on our streets. And Mr Albanese said, I agree. Are you reassured by the strength of opposition that the Prime Minister is showing to any sense or sign of anti-Semitism in our community?
Look, I think it's absolutely critical that across the parliament we stand up against anti-Semitism. I see this, and I talk to people from my community on, almost a daily basis, and there is huge concern out there. I have had students in my community, had food thrown at them, had Nazi symbols, put into their backpacks, have been verbally abused, had Jew written on a car. Like, these are appalling things that are happening in our community right now, and I think we need to be unequivocal. about that. I think that is great to see the Prime Minister speak up and be clear. That from the river to the sea is not is a chant that is not one that we should be having in Australia. And I've been extremely concerned to see things like intifada called for in our universities. That has no place
Yeah.
in this country. We all worry about what is happening overseas. We all worry about the lives of innocent civilians, Israeli and Palestinian civilians caught up in this terrible conflict. But it means there's no place for sort of violent and extreme language in this country, and there's no place for anti-Semitism. So I think it's
No.
right that the Prime Minister has spoken up on this. I think it's great that Sky is making this documentary, and I think we need to all collectively speak up against anti-Semitism, across our community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Could not agree more on that. It's while the concerns are fine, but we shouldn't allow that division or discord to be fostered here, Allegra Spender.
Absolutely right, and people can call for peace. There are many other things that people can call for that are not that sort of destructive or violent sort of language, and that could be used
Exactly.
as Dennis Richardson suggests, to incite sort of violence or hatred. There are many other ways that people can express their concern, and in different ways, and that's what I'm really urging people, because
Yeah.
we need these community, and particularly on our university campuses, we need every student to be safe, and we need every student to be welcome. And I know that is not the case for our Jewish
Mm.
students, and it is absolutely critical that we all stand up and say every student is safe, every student is
Yeah.
welcome in every place on our campuses or any of our institutions, and be very, very clear of that across the board.
100%. Allegra Spender, thanks. We'll see you next week when Parliament returns. Appreciate it.